Welcome to another edition of the Jay Rich Show. I am your host, Jason Richardson, aka Jay Rich, and I am honored here tonight to have my mentor, my guy, Mr. B, Branson Wright, the esteemed Branson Wright. How you doing, Mr. B?
Man, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. How long you've been in this industry in the journalism and media world for a while. How long are we talking?
Man, wow. Let's see. Um, professionally since 1990. 1990 was
1990.
my first job. It's interesting. When I graduated from college in '89 from the University of Cincinnati, I couldn't find a job for a entire year. I was freelancing at the Cincinnati Post, which was an evening newspaper, and also while I was in college, I freelanced for the Cincinnati Enquirer, the morning paper. And so, I thought I was getting some good experience and had some contacts after. No, I had. Let me back up. I had some internships while I was in college also. So I built a good a good base, good resume, good experience, and I had interviews all over. I interviewed out in Portland, Oregon, for a high school job. This was after graduation. In Lexington, Kentucky, had an interview. I went to Michigan, Saginaw, Michigan, for a job interview. So Chicago, Illinois, for interview. So I was going all these places for these interviews, but I couldn't get an offer. So I wondered within myself, am I good enough? Should I try something else? And so at one point, I did. I applied for the police academy in Cincinnati,
Wow. Wow.
and now granted, I had a girlfriend at the time, so I was getting pressure from her. Maybe you're not good enough. Do you want to work? This is from her family, and 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 then some of my friends there will maybe you should try something else. So so I said, okay, let me go to the police academy. They were hiring, they were recruiting. They wanted to recruit a lot of black men, as many as they could, to be on the police force. And one of my college classmates, her father was a lieutenant, and he was part of the recruiting team. So there was support, for me to go through this process. So I went all the way through the process, the physical, the mental, did everything. And the weekend before the academy, let me back up again. Also during this time, I was an extra in a movie. Do
Okay.
you remember the movie Rage in Harlem with
I
Forrest
do.
Whitaker, Robin Givens, um, and I was an extra in the movie. And one of the actors on the set, his name was Ron Thomas, and Ron Thomas, we got to be pretty cool. Nice guy. He played in the AFL at one time, so we would talk sports and things like that. So I remember telling Ron, I said, Ron, I really don't want to become a police officer. I said, but I need to work. I'm getting this pressure, and he says, look, man, I played in the AFL, as you know, but I always wanted to be in show business. So after 4 years in the AFL, I retired or basically quit. And he said he took a Greyhound bus from Houston, Texas to New York. And every day he was hitting the pavement because he wanted to be in show business. And he said it took him about a year. And in 1970, he was making $2,500 a week. In 1970,
1970 per
1970
week. Per
per
week.
week. It's a lot of money. It's a
Yeah.
lot of money now.
This is right.
So, and he said the lesson was that every day you have to do everything you can to reach your goal. He said by making phone calls, and in my case, he said to the newspapers, you know, improving your craft. He said every day you have to do something. And he said, and if you don't do it, you lose a day. And he said, I can understand your parents and your girlfriend, they love you. They think they know what's the best for you. He said, but you have to go after your dream. So, man, it was like a relief, off my shoulders, hearing him say that. So that Friday, because the academy was going to start on that Monday. So that Friday, I went down to the academy where the lieutenant, whose daughter I knew from school, and I said, sir, I said, I appreciate everything that you did for me, that you've done for me. I said, but I have to resign my name from joining the academy. And I'm thinking, oh man, he's gonna be so disappointed. And he said, you know what? He said, we were trying to figure out why you were doing this.
Mm.
I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we do a background check, and everybody we talk to, from people in your neighborhood to your high school teachers to your college professors, and they all said that you're a writer. And he said, so he says, look, he says, if it doesn't work out, we're still here. And he said, good luck to you. And man, another relief. So that was May of 1990. And then in August, a buddy of mine, David Cummings, he worked in newspaper business for a while. He worked for ESPN at some point as an editor through the years. He works for CBS right now. He's a producer for CBS Sports. And he called me. He was working in Lexington, North Carolina. And he called me. He said, Branson, he said, because I had met David, um, that there was a job fair in Cincinnati. And I had met David while we were in school. So he said, look, man, he said, I'm leaving to go to Jackson, Mississippi. And I told them about you. He said, get your resume here, and I'm sure they're gonna give you a call right away. And they called me right away. Uh, they liked my resume. They flew me down. They hired me on the spot, and I got my first job, Lexington, North Carolina, which is about 20, 30 miles south of Winston Salem. And like I said, I almost didn't get to live my dream, but and I never got to thank Ron again.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago, so I never got to thank him. Just from that conversation with him to help me to continue to pursue what I wanted to do.
Yeah. So we're in Lexington now, and what is the we're a black man in journalism. What what are some of the obstacles? Because I know there were some.
In Lexington,
Yeah.
oh,
Right. Right.
there were some. One fortunate thing is David's a brother, so at least they got to see him first
You,
before I got there.
you weren't the first one.
Right? Yeah, I wasn't the first one. Um, but what was great is it was the greatest first job anybody could have ever had.
Mm.
It was a small newspaper. Circulation then was like 15,000. Small town, but they had a black community there. And not only did we cover high schools, we also covered colleges throughout the state. So for instance, um, I'd cover a high school game on Friday. Then on Saturday, it was a two-man show, me and the sports editor. So
Okay.
then the sports editor said, you can cover any college game you want. So I could cover Winston-Salem State. I could cover North Carolina A&T. I could cover Wake Forest. I could cover North Carolina. I could cover Duke, whatever. Just pick a game, and so that was great. Then when basketball, the Charlotte Hornets, Charlotte was less than it's like an hour or so away. I could cover Charlotte Hornet games. There was no NFL then. Uh, Carolina Panthers weren't there yet, so I could cover lots of things. And also, he allowed me to write a column a week. And I remember, well, one of the compliments I got from people in the community, they said, "Man, you write a column about any and everything," which I did. And one of them, I remember, I was in this small town, smaller than Lexington, which is something, and covering a high school game. And back in the day, we used to have radar detectors when you know, the lasers that the police would, you
Hmm.
could tell if they're monitoring you or whatever. And I remember leaving out of this town, and this cop like was following me, like basically out of town, waiting for me to speed up because I could. The radar detector kept clicking, so I made sure I was under the limit, and he followed me all the way out of this town. So I wrote about it, and the way I made it sports is that I was just talking about being harassed by the police. I don't know if you remember D Brown. He played for the Celtics back in the day.
Won the dunk contest.
Yes, he did. Yes, and I
Yes,
was there.
yes.
And I was there. And I remember he got there was a bank robbery in Boston, and he was across the street, and the lady at the bank pointed him out and said he was the robber. And the dude that actually robbed the bank, he was your complexion. D Brown is dark skinned. The guy was like really short. D
The
Brown is at
six,
least six
yeah,
four, 6'5".
yeah.
And so I incorporated that in my column, and talked about D Brown was basically the lead of it, and I went into what happened to me and the power of journalism. And the good thing about it is the chief of police of that town called me, and he apologized, and he said, and I know which officer it was, and we're going to talk to him. And he said, if you ever have any issues like that again, let me know.
Mm, yeah, yeah. You Now I heard you say that one of the things that you would get praised for is writing about any and everything. And we're gonna jump around a little bit because
Oh,
I
let's
know
do
I
it.
know what's going on.
Let's do
Um,
it.
how did you find out about Quantez stickers?
I got a phone call from, and to explain to your viewers, Quantez
Yeah.
Stickers he was just drafted by the Jets. He's only depending on who you ask, he was either the third or the fourth guy that got drafted that didn't go to college, didn't play in college, just to say. And I got a phone call from a mentor of mine, Daryl Ledbetter, who's from Cleveland, and he works for the Atlanta Journal Constitution. He did a story on Stiggers in December for the AJC, and Ledbetter has a relationship with Stiggers' agent. And they both called me because Ledbetter said this would be a good documentary. And him and Daryl, knowing that I'm also a filmmaker, he connected us together, and then that's how I found out about Stiggers, and I ended up writing a story on him for ESPN's Andscape, and right now finishing up a documentary that we looked to debut June 1st or 2nd.
June, oh, this year.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We've been
Okay.
working on it. We've been
Yeah.
working on it.
Yeah. Now how did you go from writer to filmmaker? I know we jumping around, but
No, no, that's great. That's
how did
great.
we go from writer to filmmaker?
It was about 95 or 96. Ken Burns came out with baseball, the documentary series he did, and I remember watching it and I just couldn't move. I mean, baseball is my first love, and just sitting there watching what he did, and I love history and how he went through history of the game and touched all these aspects of the game. And and I was just in the back of my mind, I said, "Ah, that would be neat to do something like that." I knew nothing about filmmaking. I knew nothing about editing. Knew nothing about any of it. But all only thing of what I could see. And the good thing about writing, being a writer, I mean, we're storytellers.
Right.
I don't think. Uh, I mean, I know I can't sing or play an instrument, but I could maybe write a song. Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, storytelling is storytelling. So I always kept that in the back of my mind. What of maybe being able to do that one day. So it was about, I think it was 2000, maybe 2007 or eight. Um, I'd always knew about Dwight Anderson. Dwight Anderson was the in 1978 he was the number one player in the country, high school basketball. And whenever you spoke to someone from Dayton, Ohio, they just raved about this guy. I mean, how people from Akron would talk about LeBron, and if you talk to anybody from Lexington, Kentucky, people would rave about him because he played for University of Kentucky. And I think what was the tip for me, I was at the pre-draft camp, NBA pre-draft camp in Chicago, and one of the was a guy from Dayton, Cedric Tony. He played for the Cavs. He had like a year or two with the Cavs back in the '80s. And Cedric is from Dayton. And I remember saying to Cedric, I said, "Man, I hear everybody talk about Dwight, about how great he was." I said, "Is this a myth or is this really true?" He said, "Come with me." So we go into the gym. Dominique Wilkins is right there. He said, "Dominique, tell Branson about Dwight." And he's just, going off about Dwight. Brings me over to Isaiah Thomas. I, the Hall of Famer Isaiah Thomas.
Right. Right.
He takes me to Isaiah. He says, "Isaiah, tell him about Dwight," and he goes off about him. So we went on and on with a few players, and I said, "Okay, Cedric, you made your point." I said he was definitely the truth, and I got back to the paper, and I said, "Well, I knew some friends that were videographers. They weren't filmmakers, but they were videographers, and there was another copy editor at the Plain Dealer at the time. He was dabbling in the film business, and I knew he was a good editor. And I said, look, guys, I don't know where this will go, but I think besides writing about Dwight, it's so visual when people talk about him. I would love to try to put something together to see if we can get this done. I wasn't looking to make a lot of money. I didn't know what the finished product would be. So 7 years later, it took so long for several reasons. One, didn't have budget, didn't have money, so I people volunteered to shoot stuff. Um, and at the time, Dwight needed to go to rehab because Dwight and people can go see the film. It's on YouTube. Um, you know, Dwight, as great as he was, he succumbed to substance abuse, but he did recover. It is a happy ending. Dwight did recover and do better. And so it took us years, and we got it done. But the bug hit me. I said, this is something that I would like to do, to do films, and years later now, here we are.
So was there ever was there ever something in your mind, especially when you're starting with that story? Was there something in your mind to say, "I like this more than writing," or is it just all under the umbrella of storytelling? And I'm a storyteller, whether it's in print or whether it's on film.
Jay, that's a great question. I think now, where I am in life, because it's newer, and I'm still learning, is filmmaking is. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's I think when I think of stories now, I think of film, doing it as a film. But writing will always be my baby. Even going back to elementary school, when teachers would call my mom and tell her that, but Branson is a talented writer. Branson is a good writer, and he writes good stories and great imagination, and so it's going to always be there. Um, I mean, I wrote a book in the '90s, and it was covering a minor league team that I covered in Michigan. But it's still a goal of mine to do to be a ghostwriter for somebody's autobiography. I would still love to do that. But right now, in my career, it's I'm thinking as a filmmaker.
Okay.
I'm thinking that way. But writing is gonna always be there.
So switching gears just a little bit, because we got to talk about the early 2000s in Cleveland
Mm.
and who you got to write about at that time. You were you were the Cavs beat writer for the a Cavs beat writer for the Plain Dealer, correct?
Yeah. That was when I left. And I'll just kind of go through it. So I was in Lexington, North Carolina, for a year, and then I was at the Winston-Salem Journal for a year. At the Winston-Salem Journal, well, prior to Winston-Salem Journal, because Lexington is close to Winston-Salem, I covered Winston-Salem State, and one of the guys I covered for Winston-Salem State goes by the name of Stephen A. Smith. He
So
was
so
Stephen
so,
Smith.
so real quick. So it is true that he played basketball
Oh
there, right?
yeah, I was there.
Because
I saw him. I
there's some
covered him.
reports that he didn't play, but no, we got yeah.
Okay, let me get the record straight. Let me get the record straight. When I got to Lexington, was covering Winston Salem State. It was Stephen A's final year, and whenever he'd come off the bench, because he wasn't a starter,
Hmm.
his last year he wasn't a starter. When he'd come off the bench, the crowd would go crazy, and I remember turning to somebody and would go, why is everybody going nuts over this guy that's coming off the bench? And they said Steven was good before he got hurt. They said he was a good player.
Okay.
So I never got to see that. But this is what but honestly, this is what people told me. They said
and
he was, before he got hurt, he was a good player because
and
he
one of the
blew his
things
knee out.
right, one of the things about HBCU, it's all of us in
Yes.
there. And
Yes.
then if you can't play, they're not gonna cheer you and act
Oh,
like you can play.
no, no, no. But they would clown him too, though, because his. And I always remind Stephen A. this sometime too. His nickname was the pedestrian, because whenever he went through the lane, he'd walk.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, the pedestrian. That's a great nickname too.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, they would cheer him coming in, and like I said, people next to me said, "Hey," but they said he could ball, man. He said, but he got hurt.
Yeah. And at that time, getting hurt was like a career ender.
Oh
It
yeah,
wasn't,
yeah, you were
you know,
done.
a
Yeah,
blown a torn ACL was a blown knee, and
yeah,
it
you were
was over
done.
with.
Yeah, you were done. You were
Now
done.
guys coming back from that in 6 to 8 months.
Yes, and
So,
having Hall of Fame careers.
right,
so,
right.
so Winston Salem a year. Then I went to Lima, Ohio, and in Lima, Ohio, I covered. I don't know if you remember Greg Simpson, played at
Mhm.
Ohio State, and so for the Lima News, I covered him, to cover basketball for him. Then from there, I went to Grand Rapids Press, covered minor league baseball, covered the CBA, and then I came to Cleveland. Now, my first year in Cleveland, I covered high schools, and then the beat writer at the time, she had done NBA for years. She had done it in Minnesota and done it in Cleveland, and she said, "Hey, I'm about done. Does anybody want to cover the Cavs?" Nobody wanted to cover them. They're like, whatever. They said, well, what about the new guy who covered the CBA? And so they offered me the job. I said, great. Then LeBron gets drafted the next year.
Yeah, it's easy to nobody wants it when they're
Yes,
17 and 62.
exactly, exactly. But I also tell people this, that that year that I covered them before LeBron, as a journalist, it was great because you had access to everybody.
Mhm.
Everybody wanted to talk.
Yeah.
You could do stories, on multiple players on the team. And now, granted, when LeBron came, I mean, it made things different and excitement. But you didn't have the access to him, and understandably so. You
Right.
didn't have the access to him that you wish you would have had. But before him, like I said, it was everybody was wide open. So I covered his first 7 years. I covered at the Cavs beat, covering them. And I came off the beat. We're going to doing more. The internet starting to come around and blogging. And so we're experimenting and doing things like that. And then from there, then I became part of the Browns coverage team and did that for 4 years. And then after that, I was more of a general assignment reporter, doing features and doing different things like that. And then until April of 2000, when COVID hit, and they decided to make the plain dealer a lot smaller.
A lot smaller.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So in your this is now 33 years of I didn't mean to age you like that, but
Wow.
this is now a 33-year career.
Wow.
I enjoy asking people this. This is one of my
Wow.
favorite questions to ask.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask two questions.
Okay.
Who is your favorite interview, and what is your favorite story that you've written?
Oh man, I love this question. My favorite interview. That that is mm,
Now, don't
I-
get in trouble with anybody, but you
no,
know,
no, because I must say I've had some really, really good interviews. Um, it's easy to say my favorite story. Um, well, there's two. Um, my favorite story is my last story,
okay,
which was the last one I wrote was actually on a young lady named James for NC State.
okay, yep.
Um, that was the last story that I've written earlier. It was earlier last month. It was during the
I
Final
think
Four.
yeah,
During the
yeah.
Final Four. During the Final Four. Um, but my favorite story is the one I did on the summit, on the Ali summit. Um, I and I did two versions. I did one for the plain dealer, which is my favorite, and then I had sort of a follow up a few years later because there was a person in the photo. Depending on what angle you look at, there's a guy. He's either his head is blocked or you can't see him straight on, and he never like got any pub. So it was good to follow up, and he was still alive, which was great to do that story. But the original story that it was the 45th year anniversary of the summit. It was in 2012. I, I
What was the summit? I know, but just what was the summit?
it was the Ali Summit. When the Ali Summit is when Jim Brown made the call to John Wooten, who was the president of the Black Economic Union organization, which was based here in Cleveland, and they gathered all the black athletes together to two sides of the story. They said it was to support Ali, but actually it was for them to listen to Ali's reasons of being a conscientious objector. And once they heard him give his reasons and he talked it out, then that's when you saw the famous press conference and the picture when they said they supported Ali's right to be a conscientious objector. I love the story, um, not only the finished product, but I loved doing the reporting by talking to Jim Brown, and didn't get to talk to Bill Russell. He didn't want to talk about it, and Bill Russell people that know Bill, you know, yeah, and not being able to talk to him, they say, "Well, yeah, that's Bill." Then some days Bill was like, "Hey, he was all talk." So, um, but the fact that all the men alive on there that I spoke with, except Bill Russell, was an honor to spend time and I have relationships, um, you know, and develop relationship with many of the men that were on there. So I really love doing that story.
I ain't gonna let you get away from who your favorite interview was too.
My favorite interview. See that? Oh, there's so many. There's so many. There's so many. Um, um, you know, Jim Brown, because he's such an iconic, such an iconic figure. Somebody that I looked up to. Uh, because my mother first told me about Jim Brown when I was a little kid getting into football. So she told me about him. Saw him as an actor, saw him as an activist. Um, really, really loved interviewing him. Pete Rose, growing up in Cincinnati, all about the Big Red Machine, and being able to interview Pete Rose was an honor. Um, just, just so many, so many, and I tell you, and even lots of times, it's not even the quote unquote famous people can be the good interviews. Sometimes it's people not so famous, or it's someone you're interviewing about somebody famous, and
Mhm.
they give you some insight that you may not have known about. I mean, those are the ones that that are lasting. When you, I mean, it's all about the story for me, not necessarily. I mean, there's a place for the celebrity of stories, but it's man, if I can get that great story, that good quote, and somebody tell you something you didn't know, I mean, that's always the best.
Yeah. Okay. 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 Um. So obviously we met while I was covering the Cavs, and
Mhm.
we were covering the Cavs this past season. Well, the season is still
Yeah,
going on,
right.
but what are your thoughts? You've seen a lot of basketball. Obviously, you've seen a lot of good basketball and a lot of bad basketball. Um, what are your thoughts on this Cavs team? Um, what are your thoughts?
Wow, it's funny. My whole thing after last season, it was more or less looking forward to see how they were going to respond. I know for Cavs fans and even for the Cavs, it was so disappointing on how things transpired against the Knicks. And what the saying is, people feel that the Cavs got punked.
Yeah.
Basically, they got bullied. And so my thing was, okay, how are you gonna respond to that? I know an old minor league baseball coach used to always say to me, when his pitchers, he said he didn't necessarily care if they had like a great outing. He said, because people gonna have good outings. He said, I always wanted to see how did they respond after a bad outing.
Mm,
That shows character. And for me, for the Cavs, for what happened last year, and for them to respond this year, I mean, look at that game, and 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 listen to what Spider said. I got tired of losing in the first round,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
and as bad as it was that first half, as bad as they were shooting, they showed a lot of heart. They showed a lot of heart coming back. So for me, the injuries, the disappointment to last year. And granted, Orlando's a young team, but they were still capable of from them blowouts alone of beating the Cavs in the series. But how they responded and how they're going to be playing the Celtics in Game One Tuesday, I'm impressed on how they switch things around.
Yeah, I like the fact that they were able to in one game, they were able to get punched in the mouth and then respond. I think that everybody knows the famous quote that Mike Tyson says, everybody
Right,
has a plan until they get punched in the mouth,
right,
right? Like they were down 18 in the first half of a game 7, getting booed, legitimately booed in the arena. There was people's jobs on the line, all kind of things.
Oh yeah.
You know, and to then say, let's just calm down, let's just regroup, come back, and they win the game which by a correctly predicted score from you. Well, you said 10, they won by 12. Like that kind of stuff shows something. I'm kind of excited about what they can do. Um, Everybody's expecting them to lose to Boston, and I understand that as well.
Mhm.
But I'm excited. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, it should be. I'm sure even the Cavs know that they're underdogs to the
Yes,
Celtics. I mean, Celtics been best team in the East, you know, most of the season, 99% of the season. Maybe even the best team in the league. And but the Cavs in those three games, the Cavs won one of them, and those other two they were in them.
right.
So you got to play the game. I mean,
Absolutely.
you got to play the game. I mean, look with Denver and Minnesota.
I can't wait for game two. I want to see how Denver responds.
Yes, yes.
You
How,
know,
how you going to respond? But the point is, Minnesota definitely the underdogs in that, but they didn't play like that in game one. That
that's
they were the
right.
underdogs.
That's
They're
right.
like we belong here. So I'd say for the Cavs, I know I made that prediction yesterday, but it was lucky, making that prediction. But I just wouldn't take it for granted that this is going to be an easy series for Boston. I don't.
I agree.
I think they've been sitting out for a while. They got their own injuries they got to deal with, and the Cavs have nothing to lose. Nothing to lose.
That's the worst. That's the worst type of team to go against. People with house, like the Cavs are. They've been playing with pressure for the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
The pressure of we got to beat Orlando. Then you win the first two games, then you get blown out games 3 and 4, and you got to come back and now win. And Mitchell's hurt now; his knee is hurt. Then you lose Jared Allen. Like they've been playing with this kind of pressure that is like, okay, and not saying that Boston has none, but it's different. And I also think that the Orlando series, first of all, getting over the hump helps them,
Right.
but also the physicality of that series. If they can bring that same physicality to the Boston series, Boston's not nearly as physical as Orlando and New York and things like that. So, you know, I don't want to say the Cavs are going to win or anything like that, but
Right.
they're not. I, I wouldn't be shocked if this is a longer series. I'm hearing people say a sweep and everything. I wouldn't be shocked if this was a 6 or 7 game series.
Don't let the Cavs win game one.
Don't let
don't
yeah,
don't let them win game one. And
yes,
and that could just change
yes,
so much when it comes in terms of pressure. And people have to remember the Cavs aren't Miami. They're a better team than Miami, especially because of the injuries Miami had.
right,
And they're a better team than that. So got to play the game. I'm
yeah,
I'm I'm looking forward to it.
yeah. I can't wait. Before I let you go, I wanna know how you. I don't mean to keep bringing this time frame up, but
No, it's
30
okay.
30 years in the game. How do you see it? How do you see media, specifically Black media? How do you see it changing?
Well, it changes every day. I think when I first started, and I want you to Google. There was a laptop we used. It was we called it a Radio Shack. It was about it was maybe about 8.5 by 11,
Yeah,
and it was a small screen at the top, and you had and it was like type on it, and it was it was crazy. And then you had to send your story. You had these couplers where you get a payphone, and you had two cups, and you take your payphone and you put it, you dial a number, and then you put the covers on, and it would signal, and it would go to the newspaper. It would go to their main computer and go like that. And here's a funny story. So I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, covering a high school playoff game. I'm in uh, not a great neighborhood in Charlotte, and cover the game. Game's over. I'm trying to write my story, and they turn the lights off and everything in the stadium, lock the doors, all of that. And I'm in there trying to write and send my story. So I have to hop over the fence and I go across the street. Now, this is back in the day. I mean, you saw BMF is back in the day with the beepers.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So you got the homies standing by the payphone with their beepers on. And here I come. I got to send my story for deadline. And I'm like, bruh, I'm a reporter. I need to send this story. I need to borrow this phone for a minute. And they're like looking at me, and I'm like, okay, watch. And I'm demonstrating to them how things are going on. Now they got some business they trying to do,
Right,
but I'm trying to do some business too,
right, right,
to send my story. So I say that to say how the business has changed. Blogs now. Um, as long as you got this, you can report some news. And I think the challenge is just because you have this doesn't mean you're a journalist. Uh, People still have to be trained. People still have to have more than one source. Just because you have an opinion doesn't mean you're a journalist. Just because you have an opinion doesn't mean you're right. Just because you're loud don't mean you're right. And I think in this race to be first can also cause issues to the business. And as far as being a person of color in this business, I mean, just like my grandparents told me, and they told my parents, you just have to seek excellence at every level and everything you do. And again, just remember, just because you got this don't mean you're a journalist. You got to still put in the work. You got to put it in, and check your sources. Um, if your writing is not where it needs to be, I mean, nowadays you can Google stuff,
right.
to help you with your writing. If you don't know the difference between there and there, you can look it up. Before, when we had that little Radio Shack thing, I had to carry around a dictionary.
Hmm.
Yeah, I had a little pocket dictionary I would carry around, look through, make sure I spelled it right. Now you can do stuff. There's no excuse. Yeah, there's no excuse for excellence. So the changes I see is for the better. It's more access. You don't have to wait on uh, certain people to give you an opportunity. You can create your own. I mean, you may not get paid right away, but now people can get paid off of YouTube and different things like that. Um, so I'm happy of the possibilities of where young journalists can go and create and dictate what they want in their career.
Yeah, that's great, man. I just want to say before I let you go, I want to say, you have been great for me. I've told, some people don't tell like their mentor's name; they just keep it on the hush. I tell everybody, nah, that's my mentor. Like I'm a proud mentee. You've been amazing for me, and I appreciate you, and I can't wait to see how far you go in the film, and I want to help as much as possible. You know these things already, but I just want the world to know you're my guy, and I appreciate
Man, Jay Rich, I appreciate you, man, and it sounds funny to hear somebody, you know, say nice things like that because I was once in your shoes and was always looking for people to help and people to be you know just show me the way, and which I'm happy that I was able to have people like that, and I'm happy that I'm able to help you in some way.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for watching, listening, however you're getting your podcast. We appreciate you. This is the 21. This is the Jay Rich Show, but we are a part of the 216 Sports Network. Check out all of our shows. We got two. We got the 4th and 15. Obviously, the Jay Rich Show, the Sports Minute, Outside Interference, and the Stride Bros. I appreciate you. Thank you all. Subscribe to our YouTube. And Mr. B, thank you so much. Branson Wright, thank you so much. How can it does if anybody wants to see or follow you or anything? What are your tags?
At Branson Wright on Twitter, Branson Wright Films on Instagram. Um, and can always I'm easy to be found.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm easy. I'm easy.
Wherever there's a story, Branson Wright is there. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again next time.
Okay. Thanks, man. Anytime.